Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Economic Community Development Committee of the Common Council's regular meeting of June 2nd. Call this meeting to order at exactly 7 p.m. And I will see from all your beautiful faces with us tonight is Ms. Smith, Mr. Keegan, Mr. Livingston, Mr. Kubelman, Ms. Young, and I believe Ms. Shanahan's with us. Hello, Lisa, and myself, John Cuddy. So we have everyone here tonight, which is great. And we have a couple public hearings before us tonight, but I believe Mr. Bedoli, you had wanted to speak to the items and just give us like an overview before we begin those public hearings.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. I just wanted to provide sort of a brief high-level overview of the two programs that are up for public hearing, just to provide some context. The first one is the Neighborhood Assistance Act. You may recall this from last year, those of you that were involved, and it's a state-sponsored program for tax credits for nonprofits and other eligible entities where they could raise funding through the allocation of these credits. It's done at the city level, and our agency is responsible for soliciting those requests and then allocating them. So there'll be more detail later on when it gets to the agenda item on that. We kind of wanted to just provide a high-level overview of the NAA program before Katie O'Leary, who's responsible for that program at the agency, kind of gives you the full detailed overview. The second public hearing is for Cdbg. This is the time of year where we do our annual action plan. This is the one-year document where we outline all of the spending decisions that the city has worked towards for Cdbg. This is it's a little bit later than typical, and that's because HUD actually released the numbers very late this year. So we're required to respond within 60 days, and doing this tonight will allow us to do that. Stephen Ivan, who's in charge of that program, will also be available later on in the agenda to discuss it. It is good news that we were able to sort of democratically accommodate everyone's top choice in the program, and you'll be able to go through that. Unfortunately, the number actually reduced this year, which we were a little bit shocked by in terms of what HUD allocated by about 40,000. So we were able to accommodate everyone's top first choice, but there was an overall 22% reduction. And the details included in your packet. And it'll be again on later in the agenda, but I wanted to just provide that context before the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Bedoli. Okay, now we will open up the public hearing on the 2022 Neighborhood Assistance Act program. Sabrina, do we have anyone raising their hand to speak?
We do not.
Okay, so we will close that public hearing and then open up the public hearing on the 22-23 Cdbg annual action plan. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to speak to that items?
We don't.
Okay. All right, so we will close that public hearing and move on to some of the administration work, and that is the approval of the minutes of the May 5th, 2022 meeting. Would someone like to move that item? Thank you, Mr. Keegan. Okay, any corrections before I call for a vote? Mr. Livingston?
Yeah, I'm not listed as an attendee.
Okay, so let's please make that change. Any other changes, corrections? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of the minutes as amended, please raise your hand and signify yes. Abstentions? Let the record show all in favor, with the exception Mr. Hewlman has abstained from the vote. Okay, next up we have new business, and that is planning and zoning, and that's review of the industrial zone study. I believe we have Mr. Kleppen. Hi, Steve, how are you? If you don't mind giving the group kind of like an update on what's transpired since our last meeting, and I know you sent out some new maps, and there's been a lot of discussion offline. So if you don't mind just bringing us all up to speed about those conversations. And
sure, I can do that. If I put a really quick presentation together, it's very short. Does not want to go into, there we go. All right, okay. So if you recall, last time there was a lot of discussion about, a couple of spots in general, in some of the rezoning that was involved. So the maps you see up in front of you are kind of the ones we looked at last time. So as Mr. Kites mentioned, there were a lot of conversations. I did meet with Ms. Young, Ms. Revolus, and Mr. Kites to go through some of the neighborhood areas and some of the concerns around that. And so, based on the conversations we had last time, and I also spoke with Mr. Livingston, I believe at one time, And also met with Keith Brown, I believe spoke at your last public hearing on this matter, who owns some property on Chestnut Street, which is also the kind of the sensitive area that we talked about. So I think what we put together in terms of changes to the map address those comments and concerns. Let me see, here we go. This probably illustrates it a little bit better. So these are two maps. And so the one thing I did change as well, which I'll point out on the map on the left, here is the school site through here and the parcels just down below. Can you guys see that? Or is it, I can try to blow it up a little bit. If that's me. But this is the new South Norwalk school site. This currently is in zone industrial 1. There are, I believe, 4 other parcels just to the southwest of the site that are also industrial 1. There are a few small contractor yards in there. So what we're going to do and recommend as part of this is rezoning those from industrial 1 to D residence, which is the same as proposed for the housing sites to the north, which kind of lines up, you know, more in keeping what the neighborhood should be going for in the future. But I think the area we had the most conversation about had to do with this block through here. If you can follow my cursor, here's Chestnut Street going south. This side is South Main. Here's Merritt and here's Bell Ave. So initially it was proposed that these parcels on the kind of the left-hand side here, also up through where the transfer station is, that they go from industrial 1 zoning, which is the heavy zoning, to a lighter industrial zone. There was a lot of concern raised by the council folks that I talked to, and as well as Mr. Brown and others. So what we're proposing to do is keep the zone neighborhood business, which is a lighter zone. I'll show you some of the uses in just a second. So the parcels on the right-hand side are currently zoned neighborhood business. So what we're going to recommend doing is making them all neighborhood business. And here you see, here's the Smilo site. And again, here's the transfer station up here. They would become legally non-conforming as they were proposed to become as part of the change from I1 to I2. So there's not any difference in the impact on them. I don't believe they're happy with the change, but you know, the change from I2 to neighborhood business doesn't really change any implications for them as far as zoning goes. Then we aligned some of the industrial 2 sites just to have, there is this stretch through here. This is where the brewery is just to the south of Smilo Center. And there are some smaller industrial properties.
Okay, all right, bye.
Okay, here's a blow up. Probably would be a little easier to speak to this. Again, here's Merritt, here's Bell Ave, Chestnut Street, and South Main. So the zoning for those pieces right now is over here is the right-hand side, which fronts on South Main, is neighborhood business. And on the left side is industrial 1. So we're proposing to make the entire block neighborhood business, which makes sense from a bunch of different perspectives in terms of lining up with the uses that are there. Then you have a whole block that's the same zone where you don't have the rear portion of properties in one zone and the front portion in another. And it also, you know, you don't result in any nonconformities with the Smilo Center. The next slide just kind of shows the uses that are currently allowed in the zone, the neighborhood business zone. So on the left-hand side are the as of right uses, and on the right are special permit uses. You'll notice that there are a lot of same titles. So you have offices, multifamily dwellings, retail, and restaurant, and they're listed in both site plan and special permit uses just based on the size and the scope of the project. So when you get to have like, for example, a restaurant over 2,500 square feet, that could be kicked into the special permit category. And that's just based on, you know, the special permit. And I think we went through this last time. The difference between a site plan and a special permit is the special permit gives the Planning and Zoning Commission a little broader discretion on whether they feel a particular proposal is appropriate or not. And there are a lot of criteria that they look at, not only in terms of traffic, but also in terms of, you know, neighborhood context, the scale, the scope, the size of the buildings, and so forth. So that's kind of like a broad kind of brush overview of the neighborhood business zones. But the neighborhood business zone is a pretty common zone. throughout a lot of sections of the city, including around these neighborhoods now.
So can I ask a question, Steve? So
Sure.
what's the benefit of having, where does it say offices under both categories? Is it as a right or is it a special permitted use?
Right, so if the office, for example, is less than 8,000 square feet, like see a picture of the
Oh,
building.
okay,
that's less
okay,
than-
I see, okay, I see it.
Then that would be a site plan, but when you get to have a building that's larger than 8,000, then that becomes a special permit.
Why would it be allowed if it's larger than 8,000 square feet?
Because depending on the site, it may be appropriate for that site. And some sites can hold the, whether it's the parking or the traffic or what's immediately adjacent or in the neighborhood context for them. So if that particular office is surrounded by other commercial uses, it may not have the same impact if that office was surrounded by all, 2 or 3 family homes, something like that. So that's what some of the things they would look at.
And so gas stations. So I think at one point there was a gas station in that area, correct? Do you recall that?
In that particular block, I
I
don't.
think on South Main, yeah. I think there was maybe years ago. I don't know if anyone else knows that. Are there any things on this special permit use list that we could get rid of? Or are these things that,
Those are all currently allowed in the zone. So that's a separate, you have to think about it because the neighborhood business, it's in East Norwalk, it's further north in South Norwalk. It's in a lot of different neighborhoods. So if you change the use, you're not just changing it for this property or this block, you're changing it throughout the city so that there's broader implications beyond this area.
Okay.
The likelihood of a gas station going in some of those areas is pretty low just based on where gas
Right.
stations want to site themselves.
okay. Okay.
Steve, this is David Huvelman. I have a question. Can you do a specific carve out though? In a specific area, naming a block or that to carve out and take out a special use? Is that possible?
That's not really, I wouldn't say that's good practice just because that's kind of getting along the lines of spot zoning, especially for something like a gas station. You could put caveats around it that it can't be within X number of feet of certain uses, but I think we're getting a little into the weeds on some of this. But.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know. Thank you.
Does anybody want to go back to the maps at all? Like, I'm happy to go back over any of that. It was unclear. I know
Yeah,
Rick had-
Steve, you mind going back to the map, please?
Is this one good or you want another one?
57, is that Mr. Brown's property?
Correct.
And with this change, will he be allowed increased residential use?
Yes, so right now he can't do any residential use there, and the zone doesn't allow it. So the proposed I2 zone does allow residential use. In speaking with him, I don't think it's a secret that he'd probably prefer to do something beyond that as well, but I think that's probably better handled as part of the comprehensive zoning rewrite versus the industrial zones piece of it.
Any
Right, so
questions?
help me get my bearings here. 57 is Keith Brown's property,
Right, here's
Right.
Smilo.
Smilo, and then what is 24 and 15?
24, that's also his property as well. That's that little piece on the very end. It's, I think there might be some parking and grass there, but it's a small, I think that's part of his property, but it's just a separate parcel. There's nothing, the building is mostly on 57.
Okay, and so 15 is that new contractor yard that went in, correct?
15 is actually, I believe, the former railroad right-of-way, whereas the contractor yards will be.
Or 9, 13, and 26.
Correct.
Now, are you saying that that's changed? The zoning for that is changed or no?
It's, right now it's industrial 1, but it's proposed to go to industrial 2, which is the lighter of the two.
But these 9, 13, and 6, because they've already started, won't be impacted by I2. Are they currently, what are they zoned as?
So they're currently zoned industrial 1, and they're approved all 3 as contractor yard sites. So no matter what zone you change it to, you could change it to residential, whatever you change it to, they'd be still allowed to legally operate the contractor yards on those sites. And as long as they continue to do so. I mean, if they change the use to something else, then they wouldn't be allowed to go back to the contract.
But they're operating as I2 or I1 right now?
Currently I1. Yeah, so you can, it's a little off the map, but it's a little further south on the map on the right.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, a little north. So those are right here. Those are all, this is the I1 extends all the way up to Ely and Henry and then goes further south. So it's being proposed to rezone this from either downzone to a neighborhood business, which is like the lighter, very light, mix of types of commercial, or to residential. Oops, sorry about that.
That's unfortunate for 9, 13, and 26, because those guys just moved in. They just started just a few months ago, right?
Yeah,
they had applied and right for a permit.
right.
sometime ago.
They knew that the moratorium was coming, so they applied for their zoning permits before the moratorium was even in effect.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody have any questions?
Not
Anyone
that.
from the
How
committee?
how does this affect, I guess it's parcel on South Main 134, I guess. I think that's Terzian.
So he's over on, he's right here.
Yep.
He's here, and I think that he's similar. He's got a small piece, but also this larger piece. So he's proposed to go, there no changes from what we discussed last time. It was proposed industrial 2 before, and that we didn't make any recommendation changes. So the contractor yard portion of that would become legally non-conforming under this scenario.
Okay.
Okay, any
But
other
if they
members?
sell and change hands, they are not grandfathered in, right? Or-
No, they can, as long as whoever, so the sale of the property doesn't remove the nonconformity, only if they change the use. So if it could go from Terzian contractor to Johnson contractor, and they'd still be allowed to operate as the current operation is proceeding.
Right, that hence being the dilemma for some.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
outside of the city condemning the property through, eminent domain or something, there's nothing we can do about that. They have legal rights to keep operating as they operate.
Has any thought, Steve, been put into how to incentivize the property owners, the business owners to change use, or if they were to sell, incentivize those purchasing that property to be conforming to the new regulations?
Yeah, I think there's several things in the new zoning that hopefully will lead to some of that in certain areas. So for example, the building height and number of stories has increased. The parking requirements for certain uses has dropped. And we've also introduced uses that they couldn't do before, including, as we talked about with 57 Chestnut, you can now do residential that's complementary to the underlying commercial use. So we're hoping that there's a little more flexibility and it frees up other things that they couldn't do before. So I think that that's the way we build in the incentives.
Because obviously, we're looking to we're trying to paint a picture for the area, And for those, it's a bit discouraging to know if someone were to sell their property, their non-conforming business, they could sell to someone else, and that person can begin the same operations of the same use of the same business under new leadership, and just continue on being non-conforming. I see with us tonight is Nora Nadelsky Eichner. I see your hand raised. Do you have a question?
I do. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
And forgive me if I'm jumping ahead in this. Are we also going to talk about the South Norwalk school site, or are we ready to do that now?
I mean, ask away.
Okay, great. So hi, Steve, and I apologize. I know that you guys have been working on this for a long time. And I'm about to ask questions that, we couldn't ask earlier because the site was not public. And I have flagged this to the mayor, and others that I had concerns about this. I know that I'm not the only one by a long shot on the council, but we couldn't publicly discuss it. And so I couldn't make public comments. So I apologize for making what is, I think, a pretty substantial concern, raising a pretty substantial concern this late in the game. But my position is that given the school site, we need to really substantially rethink the zoning for all of Meadow Street, on both sides of the school site. We want this to be a school that kids can walk to. We want this to be a place that, really is environmentally clean and safe for our students. And I am definitely uncomfortable with any I-1 zoning in that area. And I'm curious to get community input around I-2, because I-2 still obviously can lead to increases in heavy truck traffic, which is a real concern for safety and walking there. So, my request would be, and I recognize that I'm not a member of this committee, so I'm making it more in the context of public comment than anything else. But my request really would be that there be a substantial revisit to this area now that we are locating a school there, with a real thinking about whether it is appropriate for that area to be zoned industrially, and really reconsidering that. And again,
have a different
Zelda, honey, I'll come get you in a sec. And in particular, really considering what it would mean for students to be walking along those roads, what it would mean for students to be sitting in those classrooms with those buildings and all that truck traffic passing by. And then in relation to that, the second part of this, and I spoke with Councilmember Young about this earlier today, also addressing really comprehensively in the way that, has been done in relation to the South Norwalk TOD, the consequences then for the community. The community has fought long and hard to get this school there and to get these sort of problematic industrial uses that are impacting residences in that area shut down or limited. And I am concerned that the community is going to get that win. And a decade later, these properties are all going to sort of flip to properties so expensive that it pushes out those same community members. So I would really request both that it be rezoned, but also that rezoning be thought through strategically in terms of what kind of protections we can put in place for existing renters in the area, for existing homeowners in the area, such that the community benefits from the removal of these environmental hazards and gets to reap the benefits of, the increased property value in the area. And I believe that we have the capacity to do that. I think very highly of the work that your office does, that Brian Bedoli has done. I recognize that these are complex asks, that it may involve zoning changes, that it may involve, property tax revisions, that it may ultimately lead us to complicated questions about what we can and cannot do by state statute. But I think it's all really worth revisiting and thinking about strategically. Again, given the goal of having this school become a truly central community anchor that will benefit a community that has suffered for decades from environmental harms caused by their location bordering an industrial zone. And I think we really owe it to them to think comprehensively and strategically about this entire corridor, starting, very much with the question of Meadow Street industrial zoning in particular. So anyway, I recognize this is a huge ask late in the process and that I am totally new to this conversation and I'm very sensitive to that. And at the same time, I feel very strongly that I have an obligation to the community to raise these issues. And I know that these are issues that Councilmember Revolus and Councilmember Young have brought up repeatedly in other contexts. So I just want to add my voices to theirs and commend you for the work that you've already done and the sensitivity to the neighborhood, but ask for these sort of further revisions. And I apologize. I know that was long-winded, but I think it's a really central issue. I want some real to put forward some real thought on.
Thank you, Nora. Yeah, we definitely have a lot to talk about before the next meeting. Anyone else have any questions? And I apologize, I'm not seeing if all the hands, so please speak up if you do. Okay. I know I'm very respectful of District B representation. This is your district. I hold your opinions in high regard. So hopefully, we can come to some sort of compromise and some understanding, and everyone can walk away from this happy. So that
Chairman Kites, I just want to say thank you to Nora for voicing your concern so eloquently and on point. And as you said, we've been talking about this for a very long time. We have not been quiet about it. And I know that every council member knows my position and Diana's position well. But I think now that the site has been identified, as Nora has said, we need to have a conversation, and I know Councilman Kites might make this happen, possibly with the consultants, because I think, Stephen, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know that this was announced to them during that process, because I think we were going through that process. So now that we have a location and they put in their suggestion for what that area should be zoned as, I-1, I think it deserves a second round or at least a conversation with them, with the consultants about this issue.
Sure, I'm
Chairman
happy to
Kites,
step
I don't know.
that'll be happening next week.
Great. And I would encourage all the council members to attend that if they can, so that they can, give their input and hear what the consultants have to say.
Sorry, Barbara, you had your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Kites. Yeah, I recognize how complicated this issue is of the zoning here in South Norwalk with, industrial so close to a school. It's, and I know you've put so much time into it, Steve, and so many people have done so. But, with the announcement of the location of the school, I think, a lot of us, I'm going to just speak for myself, are just really committed to making this the best, safest, community-minded school and area as possible. So, I recognize how difficult it is and how much we have to factor in. But I'm just asking for that, a second look to just be very, very sensitive to these concerns.
And not only sensitive, I think we need to be intentional. I think we need to find some solutions, whatever they may be. I think it needs to be intentional, and we have to go into this with a purpose. And the purpose is doing what you just said, making sure that all children have safe routes to school.
Right.
And
and also to that point, Ms. Young, realistic, where, like I spoke about earlier, where, whatever the designation may be in that area, you still, have businesses operating that will be non-conforming, that may be there. So this is, we got to look at it from all angles, and what's, a possibility of 10 years to never. So, and like, as you all know, I'm very sensitive to, pedestrian traffic in that area, especially now that we're putting a school there. And I could tell you that's non-existent right now as far as accessibility and crosswalks and all that. I know you've all heard me say that. So yeah, definitely it just became public, but the school being a part of the industrial zone, the conversation is they've been hand in hand for quite some time now, and we know there's issues and issues to address. So I'm hoping we can keep working on it and find a way through this. Okay.
And Nora, you are not late to the discussion. You at the right time. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad to be a part of it. I know that you and Councilmember Revelous have really been leading the charge on this. But I drive through there every day, and
Yep.
if I wouldn't feel safe with my child, then no child. And I think that's the perspective we really have to sort of come
Absolutely.
from. It has to be safe for our kids. So I really appreciate the leadership you two have shown on pushing that issue. Because it's a great site, to have a parcel that big is fantastic. We just have to make
Right.
it work for the community.
All right. Thank you, Steve, and to be continued.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. Next item up is under business development and tourism, and that's to authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute all documents to renew the contract for marketing services between the city of Norwalk and Dorenberg Callenbach Advertising LLC for $150,000. Account number noted. And who will be speaking to this will be you, Miss Church.
I am actually just going to throw it over to Todd Kallenbach. He is with GK. He's the president and CEO of that firm. He has a little presentation for you guys to highlight the work he's been doing over the past year that he's been with us. Year and some change, actually. So Todd, go ahead.
Thanks, Sabrina. And hello, everyone. Good evening. As Sabrina mentioned, I have a presentation of about 15 minutes, and then I'd be happy to take your questions. However, if you see something that you'd like to ask me as I go through it, please do so. Just kind of shout out to me because I probably won't see you raise your hands. So can everyone see my screen, big red block with City of Norwalk in large white letters?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Again, my name is, I know I've presented to most of you before, but my name is Todd Kallenbach and my firm is Dornenberg Callenbach Advertising. We go by DKA because it's much easier to say and spell. We're based in Bloomfield, Connecticut. We've been in business for 28 years. We have a number of clients around the state, including those in various market segments like economic and community development, as well as finance, education, health and social services, arts and entertainment, et cetera, and have developed sort of niche experience based on those client relationships. We have been working with the city, as Sabrina mentioned, for about a year and a half now. We have 3 different contracts that are in different phases right now. And I know you guys know which piece is up for vote tonight, but it started with business and parking promotion, which was initiated in November 2020. Followed by tourism, initiated in January of 2021, and then another piece for economic and community development that was initiated this past November of 2021. And I'll show you different aspects of those campaigns tonight and give you an update on those. So our overall scope of services across those 3 contracts is pretty broad. It includes brand creation, including naming and logo development, development of some websites that I'll give you a preview on tonight, commissioning photography, custom photography, social media management, launching the websites and the brand and having a promotion plan, as well as an ongoing ad plan that we'll speak to, as well as doing some print materials and regular reporting of key performance indicators in terms of how is the campaign doing and what is our return on investment looking like so far. In working with the city with the objective of branding Norwalk as a destination, we set these marketing goals to create a distinct identity for Norwalk as a great place to explore, dine, shop, play, and stay. Of course, you can add work to that and other things as well too. And as I mentioned, we wanted to put measures on there to make sure we're keeping track on how the campaign is progressing in terms of engagement, direct engagement, whether that's website clicks or social media likes or follows or direct inquiries for information, et cetera, as well as working with the business and community and helping them out, as we'll talk about, and trying to get a gauge on how they're doing in terms of visits, revenues, retention, development, et cetera. As we know, these past 2 years have been an anomaly. So, hopefully everything is trending upward, whether we have had some effect on that or not. But we know that for some, it's been a tough slog for the past 2 years, particularly restaurants. And again, there's some spin-off growth that we can measure too, particularly in working with the parking authority. We can look at parking and taxes, as well as hopefully long-term commitments by people to come to the city, not just for a visit, but to work, as well as to potentially become residents. And you can see some of the entities down below that we've developed, starting with Visit Norwalk, which is the tourism brand, a sort of parallel look with Norwalk for Business, which is the economic and community development brand. And as I mentioned, we work closely with the parking authority, as well as different city departments in what we do. And starting with the tourism brand Visit Norwalk, we really envisioned that there would be one platform, many neighborhoods, and many assets that this brand would support. And again, really trying to embrace all that Norwalk offers in terms of diversity, broadly defined, whether that's socioeconomic or race, or the types of attractions and things that are apparent in the city that can be enjoyed by all. So we have a broad look that we brand under this Visit Norwalk brand. We talk about the word platform. From a marketing context, that means we have the website, right, which is sort of the hub of information. And then we have these spokes that drive traffic to that, whether that's social media or advertising or the weekly e-newsletter, et cetera. And then the other way we look at platforms, particularly in the digital space, is, we're accessible pretty much anywhere, from your desktop to your tablet to what we show in the lower right-hand corner is hopefully an app that will be developed with the city in the next year or so. It'll be able to cover some customer service issues. It used to be called the Pothole Reporter, I think, but as well as give people an idea of how it would link with tourism and economic and community development. So we started with business and parking support, as I mentioned, and then we launched, or relaunched, I should say, Visit Norwalk, the website, in August of 2021. Again, we carried over a lot of business support. There are business listings on there. Businesses list their different promotions and their events, and we talk about businesses as well as attractions. We broadly define it as shopping, dining, recreation, and either arts and culture, to kind of encompass everything. Of course, there's hiking and biking and walking and everything else as well in there. And then we look at, we've included information on Norwalk's neighborhoods, the different lodging that might attract weekend stays or overnights, as well as we've got listings of apartments and available office and business space. As far as keeping the website fresh with content, we've developed several itineraries on the site, so you can look at articles that are accessible from the homepage on, the 15 must-do things, family day trip, family weekend, a couple's weekend, 10 best tacos, et cetera. So we've got several packaged itineraries in there. As I mentioned, we also have themed and seasonal promotions that we support, such as the Holiday Shopping Guide and Spring Restaurant Week, which happens to be this week. You'll see the blue in this presentation. I should mention too that all of these hyperlinks are in here. I shared this as a PDF with Sabrina, and I'm sure she'll share it with you. So if you want to take a look at any of these, digital properties, they're accessible this way if you go onto your computer or from your phone. We also incorporate the daily social media posts. There's the Instagram feed that kind of goes right into the homepage, so you can see whatever we've posted on any given day. And then weekly e-newsletters, which is what's happening this week, that reach both a visitor audience as well as businesses defined as current, meaning those that have their business listings on the site and prospective, those that we want to work with going forward. And I'll give you some numbers on those in just a sec. The tourism advertising campaign was launched this past October with the objective of elevating brand awareness of Visit Norwalk in the tri-state area. So we looked at both a 35 and a 50-mile radius, which we consider to be sort of a 1-hour drive market. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see those red circles that are on the map there with Norwalk as the epicenter. So 35 miles, you can kind of see how far that goes out, as well as 50. So kind of vary on how far out we go. It's kind of a reach versus frequency thing, just because as you go further out, you got more people to reach and you're spreading the same dollars. We're also looking to, with this campaign, gain more social engagement. A lot of it is digital in nature, as well as to influence and increase direct visits to the city. And we do have some measures on that too. We looked at the broad market, but again, within that market, our primary demographic is adults and families with the decision maker mostly as women, 25-54, working on behalf of making these types of decisions for their families, their spouses, et cetera. Also, we have some business messaging in this campaign too, that kind of looks like it comes from the same place, but has specific targeting toward a business audience. As I mentioned, the campaign is pretty digitally focused, but it does have several strategies. The digital part gives us broad reach, the ability to target the demographics, the geography, et cetera, as well as it's very data driven. We get results pretty much in real time, so we can see what's working in terms of driving engagement and website clicks, et cetera, and what may not be working comparatively, so we can kind of shift the budget a little bit on the fly. And I'll show you how we've done that in the past, what's it been, 7 months. As I mentioned, the campaign kicked off in October and is funded through the end of June, and hopefully we'll have a refresh on that going forward too with the media budget that Sabrina manages. We kind of divided our seasons for visitation into what we call peak and off-peak. It's pretty common in the tourism business, but peak season is of course the warm weather months where there's more activities happening and things to do, April through November. And then the off-peak is kind of the cold weather months where there's really less things to do. And we kind of gauge the spending and the reach a little bit based on those same highs and lows. So you can see from the context of these charts on the right, that in a peak month, we would have social going, we would be doing mobile geofencing, which I'll talk about in a second, as well as adding some video and TV to kind of broaden the number of impressions that we're getting. So on a monthly basis, the peak gets us about 1.3 million, the off-peak is about half of that. When I mentioned the mobile geofencing, I know there's a lot of information on this page, so I'm not going to read it to you, but I'll kind of tell you what it is. With mobile geofencing, this is a way in which we can deliver digital advertising by drawing a virtual fence around a geography and also pinpointing within that geography different types of attractions that are similar to what's in Norwalk. So again, using that same 25 to 50 mile radius in this case, we can deliver advertising to people in those zones who enter those zones with their mobile devices on. As long as they're turned on, those ads will reach them and be delivered through apps such as Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Conversely, we have conversion zones within the city of Norwalk, so we can measure the physical visits of people who are actually coming into those zones. Again, they're sort of circles of geography similar to Steve's maps, but within those zones, we've kind of pinpointed where the attractions are, whether it's the concert hall, the aquarium, the Sono collection, the Mill Hill, et cetera, the Matthews Mansion Museum, and Stepping Stones. So I'm going to show you some of those direct visits in just a second. Another part of the media campaign is we've worked pretty closely with Hearst, Connecticut media. Hearst has a very broad presence in the state, and particularly in Fairfield and New Haven counties. They manage the newspapers and the websites of those newspapers in the 6 majors that cover Fairfield and New Haven County. They also publish Connecticut magazine, so we've got some print component there too. And they have pretty robust digital programs as well too, so we can deliver some social media, some video, et cetera. And we've also started to do, in this latest peak season, April through May, what we call sponsored content or content marketing. These are articles that address these itineraries I talk about. That are, another word for that might be advertorials, a combination of, paid advertising, but in a longer form copy format. So these are about 750 words, and we've so far done one so far on family fun weekend, a couples weekend, and this month we're highlighting all the summer fairs and festivals. And that's delivering approximately 600 or 650,000 more impressions per month. And then finally, now that we are in this peak season, we've added on a TV component again for brand building. We looked at News 12, and they have different hubs within that map geography that I gave you. So the regions that we built into this budget cover New Haven and Fairfield counties, as well as reach into the Bronx and Westchester. And the formats that we're using are 30-second spots and what we call billboards, 10-second billboards. They're running in morning news. So as the news comes on, the 10-second piece comes on. This hour is brought to you by Visit Norwalk. And in the context of that particular newscast, that 30-second commercial will play as well too. So this kind of quantifies what that buy looks like as well. I'm just going to give you some statistics of where we are right now, just to give you some idea of scope on numbers. As I mentioned, the e-newsletters go out every week, usually on Monday. Our database is 2,000 people, and it's divided into about 1,100 consumers and about 800 businesses, again, categorized by those participating, those who have presence on the Visit Norwalk website, and those we hope to work with to add their business listing. The open rates are very high. Anything over 20% is considered fantastic. The click rates, again, it's a much different story. The industry average on click rates for digital stuff is usually about 0.5%. So these are all pretty strong. It just, it's not everybody who reads something is going to click through perhaps and go to a website to get that deeper dive, but we can at least measure that. In terms of the website, again, it got launched this past August. So far, we've tracked 18,000 unique visits, and as you can see, just from the month of May, it's continuing to grow because it's well outpacing what might be an average of 1,800 per month if you take that 18,000 and divide it by the number of months the website's been up. On the right side is a current look for the month of May on reach from the Facebook and the Instagram posts. If you look sort of vertically down the page, the statistics are under the blue title. So the Facebook statistics are on the left, the Instagram statistics are on the right. As far as reach in terms of who's getting the message is about this past month, 350,000 people saw the message on Facebook, about 168 or 167,000 saw it on Instagram. If you kind of track this down the page, what you'll see with these charts on the bottom is it kind of, in terms of engagement, it's almost an inverse. We have, even though people are seeing these messages, those that are liking the page or following the profile, we have more for on the Instagram side than we do on the Facebook side, which is kind of interesting. But if you look at this demographic makeup, and remember I was telling you that the ad campaign is kind of targeted with a skew toward women, you can see that the Facebook and the Instagram audiences are both about 2/3 women, 1/3 men. But these little bar charts, and again, I know this detail is hard to see the way I'm presenting it, but they're broken down by age, 20 in 10-year increments. So Instagram is trending that much younger in terms of the higher bars here too. So we are covering a broad age range too. We can also see certain posts here in the middle. I know you can't read this, but we can track which ones are delivering the most reach as well as the most engagement. So for this past month, there was a post on the state money that's further developing the Sono train station and the platform development. That was the highest one. This post on Restaurant Week, which was just the other day, scored pretty highly as well too. The unveiling of the Sono bike rack, that was one of our most popular posts of the month. And I'm sure that was posted on the city's websites as well too. So that's been a highlight this past week. If we look at it, there's a lot of stuff on this page, so I'll just summarize. But if we look at some of the digital ads that we call programmatic advertising, this is now tracking year-to-date, calendar year-to-date, January through May. So some samples here, we're running both posts and videos within posts. We've got about 4 million impressions, and the click-throughs you can track through here as well. I mentioned that mobile Geo Fencing, we have just about 500 direct visits that we can measure that came off that campaign so far. So on this next page, and again, a lot of detail here, but I'll just summarize. These are some of the geofence areas as well as some of the attractions. And we can track this funnel here in terms of impressions that were delivered, number of people that clicked, the rate, what that rate looked like, and then what translated into physical visits. So we can see, for example, that, and probably no surprise, the conversion zones, most of those people had been in downtown Stamford at some point before they came to visit Norwalk, because the two attractions that are pretty high here are the Symphony and the Town Center, which again are probably in the same pretty much geographic zone. But some other interesting facts here too. This goes down to we had people coming from Fairfield, Danbury, as the Beardsley Zoo in Bridgeport, as well as the Bronx Zoo down in New York, who ended up making visits based on seeing the advertising as they were in those prior areas. The Hearst program, again, I'll just give you a broad brush here in terms of all the different strategies that we're doing. As I mentioned, we can look at impressions and we can look at engagement in terms of click rates, and we can vary some of the spending. So, we're seeing the articles are doing pretty well this past month. And again, the number that you're looking at is on the click is anything above the 0.05 is trending in a positive direction against what would be a national average or a trend. So all of this is working pretty well. The messaging is pretty consistent in terms of the brand, whether it's a static image or a video, but again, using different types of media to deliver it in hopes of getting as broad of a reach as possible.
Ms. Young, you have a question?
Hi, Darlene. I see your
Hi,
hand is up.
I had a question. Maybe I missed it. What are impressions?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a great question. That is actually a count of how many people actually saw the ad.
Okay.
So particularly with digital media, that's measurable because what happens is there is information that gets traded between the ad in terms of what's called a pixel and your computer or your phone. So we actually know that an ad was delivered. So impressions is how many people were reached. And then there's a measure called reach, which is how many times they saw it. And then the engagement is usually measured by the click rate here. Or in fact, with social, there are likes or follows and other stuff going on as well too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so that kind of concludes the tourism ad campaign. As I mentioned, we are currently in development on an economic and community development website. We've got the architecture is pretty much done. We're starting to load in the content, writing a number of business case studies as well. This one is going to be a very data-driven site as well too, in terms of accessibility to statistics that would help the business community make decisions, resources that would connect them with people in the community for what to do as the next step in terms of how to open a business, how to start a business, how to apply, apply for financing, whatever that is, as well as some site finder activity too for available sites and properties. So our hope is that you'll be seeing that live this summer. And again, it'll be a complement to the tourism website that'll be very focused on the business community. And then finally, just some additional implementation just to show how we've kind of gotten the campaign onto the streets of Norwalk, literally. Within the Norwalk Parking Authority garages managed by LAS Parking, there are these kiosks in the garages that have rotating digital messages. So the city gets these for free, and we've got this, what's happening now. If you scan this with your phone, the kiosk looks like this little upper right area, sort of a metal freestanding thing with a digital screen on it. The company that runs it is called A-Lot Media or A-Lot Media. So in between rotations, you'll probably see, for example, the paying customers include Hartford Healthcare and others, but this pops up at least a couple times a minute. And if you do scan this with your phone, it'll open up this screen down below that gives you a direct link to go to the Visit Norwalk website, the Facebook page, or the Instagram page. And that way you can see exactly what's happening on any given day or week. In the
have we tracked the data on that? How many people have scanned it?
Yes, I can look at that too. I actually should have put that in the presentation, but I will look that up and send that through to you as well too. Because we have that particular app that showed up on the phone can track. I'm pretty sure the only place that QR code appears is on those particular kiosks. So I'll get you a statistic on that as well too. Specifically in the Sono train station, this is something that folks in the city have Jim Travers and others kind of worked up a way to really highlight attractions in the Sono neighborhood for people who are coming in on the train and want to actually walk around. So we've looked at dining, where to dine, where to play, where to shop. These are actual Norwalk businesses in Sono. The QR code takes you to those business websites. There's also an indicator that, how far it is by foot to get there, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, etc. So this campaign has been growing over a period of time as well too. And these are specifically in the Sono garage. We have developed a series of neighborhood street pole banners with kind of a consistent design. We currently have one in development for Martin Luther King Drive. I don't want to spoil the surprise because the designs are still in evaluation, but that'll be our next neighborhood to have some banners as well too. These are 2 feet wide, 4 feet high, and having ordered some of these, I think there's about 30 poles per neighborhood, something like that. We've put out some brochures in the local welcome centers. So this one is what we call the attractions rack brochure. This is a trifold. I'm showing it unfolded, but again, it highlights the major attractions. We also worked with the Historical Society to do one that is just a double-sided one that has all of the historic houses and other structures in town too, to kind of give you a history tour, if you will, in one piece. We've been doing seasonal ads. This is some of the print that appeared in the Hearst publications, Connecticut magazine, as well as we have this nice arrangement with the Norwalk Symphony Orchestra to be in their program every month. So we vary this up so that it's fresh based on the activities happening at the time, whether it's restaurant week or summer family activities or holiday shopping. We've developed some specific business advertising for the business journals as well too, and the Chamber of Commerce directory, et cetera. We're telling these case studies or success stories, as I mentioned, and focusing on businesses that are kind of components of Norwalk's creative economy, whether that's, in this case, Lindsay's Handmade Ice Cream. We've also got some in development for the Norwalk Havoc Robot League, which is another kind of unique Norwalk attraction that's just growing by leaps and bounds. And then a small business leadership coach, who Chuck Bresbury, who's got a very interesting business and a way of working with small businesses to give them really big business leadership coaching. So these will be part of the website as well as ad topic going forward. This one happened to be developed before we came up with that Norwalk for Business logo, which is why you see Visit Norwalk on the bottom. Just thought I'd explain that. Just to show you sub-branding as well too, to how to take the master brand we've created for Norwalk and be consistent, but have some variation on that so it supports different seasonal or other special events in the city. Again, this is very pertinent this month, as you know. So that's Norwalk Pride. And that's my presentation.
Thank you. Questions? No? Todd, thank you very much. I know you've been doing this for, oh, I see Mr. Heuvelman's hands up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Todd, question, you were a few slides back, the Geo Fence and the actual visits, people coming from other areas coming into Norwalk. Do we get feedback on where they go specifically? Or is that a possible way? Or I guess then by extension, the next question would be, are we getting feedback from business owners that are seeing a rise because of the work through the Visit Norwalk website or some of these other ones?
Yeah, what I showed you is direct data coming from the ad reporting. So like I said, we've kind of drawn these virtual fences around certain areas. And yes, we can actually pinpoint certain attractions in those areas that the advertising tells us they went into those attractions. The linkage with the actual business data is a little more anecdotal, but my staff and I do work with the businesses, say how are you doing? People have gotten to know my email and my phone number. So, if they need an extra boost on something, they'll call and say, hey, particularly the Wall Street Theater, for example, it's like, this show's doing gangbusters. This one needs a little bit of help. Can you do an extra newsletter mention? Can you do an extra social post, et cetera? So we've started to build this type of rapport with the businesses as well, too, just to kind of keep tabs on what we can do to extend their own marketing, as well as how we can be helpful in filling in some of the gaps, such as that ad campaign is, for example, if they're not going out as far as the Bronx or Westchester, hopefully if we feature them in an ad, that's going to draw some extra market share for them as well, too. So we're trying to establish that rapport, as I've said, and I think that I like to look at the numbers as well, too. So I encourage people who are willing to share how they're doing.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, I believe, Mr. Keegan, you moved this item, I believe. It's been a while. Sound about right? Yeah, okay. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify yes. Look, unanimous, great. All right, thank you, Todd, for all your hard work, and thank you, Sabrina, as well, for being a part of all that.
Thank you all. Thanks.
Okay, next
Well,
up.
it's been a pleasure working with you. I hope you won't mind if I kind of sign off for the landscaping discussion, but
Come on, you're gonna miss all the fun.
I'm actually the volunteer economic development chair in my town. It's smaller than Norwalk, but
Volunteer, huh?
yeah. So I know these meetings can sometimes take on a life of its own. So I do appreciate the response tonight, and thank you for your vote of confidence. Have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, item C1, authorize Harry W. Rilling to execute a contract for landscaping services between the city of Norwalk and Meticulous Landscaping, not to exceed $180,000 every year for the next 3 years, and 3 individual accounts noted. I believe, Jessica, you'll be speaking to this item. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So we were able to post an RFP for an updated landscaping contract. The current contract that is ending at the end of this month is currently held with Meticulous Landscaping. We started working with them in January 1st, 2019. Originally, that contract was held with the redevelopment agency, and they requested capital funds through the capital budgeting process to be able to support that. When the city was restructured, that particular contract moved over to economic and community development, and the capital fund request moved over to economic and community development as well. So we did post an RFP for a new contract earlier in May, and we worked with DPW and the redevelopment agency, as well as a few other departments, in order to be able to make sure that the scope and contract was, the scope for the RFP was inclusive in what everyone understood should be covered under a contract such as this. And we were able to post that in early May. We did get one response. The one response was from Meticulous Landscaping, and that was for $128,000 for year 1, $131,000 for year 2, and $133,000 for year 3. The reason why you see $180,000 in your agenda is because we also, in addition to the contract, purchase flowers for the 90 flower containers, as well as put up flower baskets, which equals $22,000. And we also purchase holiday decorations. We've started to do that again in the last two holiday seasons, and that equals $27,000. That's 50 wreaths that we put up, as well as greenery along the light posts in the urban area. So the $180,000 would cover the contract for Meticulous Landscaping, and would also include Meticulous Landscaping being the coordinator for the purchase of the flowers, as well as the purchase of the holiday decorations. I do want to note that we would work with them to ensure that we are embracing the direction that the city is going with the herbicides, and not using herbicides with the work that they will be doing. But just a few numbers to throw at you on this contract. It includes 2,600 hours of labor, and $40,000 of the contract is dedicated just to those labor hours for watering alone. The rest of the contract is dedicated to the planting, the maintenance, and the landscaping that is required throughout the urban core. And there is a map that is attached to your agenda. The urban core, when we're looking at it, includes all of Water Street, Washington, North and South Main Street. It includes the clock tower medians. It includes the medians on MLK Drive. It also includes Wall Street, River, all the way up Main. So the geography is quite extensive. When we did develop this RFP, one thing that we did do was make sure that it did not overlap with the adopt-a spots that we have in place, because we didn't want to have this contract be duplicative with those efforts in particular. And so just a little bit of information for you on the way in which we think that we'll be working with Meticulous moving forward. And just as a heads up for context, the last contract that we had, year 3, was $112,000. That did not include any of the MLK Drive medians. It did not include Klondike Park, which is on Wall Street, where we get a lot of complaints, and we've had to put some work into that outside of the contract. And in addition, I can't believe Todd left us, because it's an exciting one, learning about all the waterings that go on in the city and all of the heavy lift that happens, and learning about 1/3 of the contract is really on the purchasing of the materials, and 2/3 is really the watering and the maintenance piece. So I've learned a lot through working with the groups to be able to put the contract together. But the watering is a really important piece out of all of this. And originally in the contract, we had 30 waterings. And so that really ended up petering out by the time we hit July, and we ended up having to pay additional fees to be able to make sure that the flowers in which we had purchased actually lived through September into October. So wanted to highlight that as well, and happy to take any questions.
Mr. Livingston.
Thank you. Jess, thanks. I just looked at the materials before the meeting on this proposal. Did I read it right that you also clean up the areas as well? I mean, and they're doing the work. So that's an added bonus, right? That they're cleaning up these medians in the areas when they do this.
It is. It's a huge plus. And I think when we think of the hours that we're looking at, 2,600 hours of labor, that really is where it starts to come in. When we talk to Meticulous in the past, and what they would do for this contract is send 3 to 4 people out to mow once a week for 28 weeks, which starts in late May and goes all the way into November. But in addition to that, they have 5 to 6 people that go out weekly and do the cleanups, do the maintenance, do the landscaping. And then there's even a heavier lift when we do the holiday decorations. They coordinate with the police, as well as putting up all of the baskets and doing the planters. So, you know, it really is a heavy lift. I know that the number is a large number. I know $180,000 is a lot, but, you know, in the past, we've actually reduced from 80 flower baskets down to 20. And we've also, you know, there was a number of years that we did not hang holiday decorations at all through our urban core. And I can't tell you how many calls I've received in response to us being able to do that work, and just the added extra that it makes, you know, it just the added energy that it makes and makes to the downtown area as well as Wall Street. So, you know, they really put in a lot of effort.
I was going to say the same thing. It seems like a lot of money, but I think it's the type of addition that really makes a difference to people's perception when they visit the town and the city and how they view us. So I think it's great.
Ms. Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have to say, actually, it doesn't seem like a lot of money to me, because I know the cost of that kind of work and the cost of plantings, and beautification of the city is really important. And I'd hate to see us go down to 20 baskets. It just makes such a difference. The holiday decorations were just beautiful. It makes everyone feel good. So I just think that it's really important.
Ms. Shanahan.
Yes, and I know that some of the things that are embedded in this contract are things we don't see, and one of them is watering. And we certainly have figured out that in order to maintain the greening of the city, we have to spend the time and effort to do the watering. So I agree with Ms. Smith that, you know, this seems like a reasonable contract to me in light of all the work that they're doing.
I do want to comment that,
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I do want to comment that I am aware that we had one response to the RFP. And so there has been some thought to internally of saying, okay, do we approve, you know, if you were to approve for a year, do we want to go back out in a year's time with an RFP to be able to have additional respondents? So I know that has been a discussion, and I wanted to put that on the table as well, because I know that has been voiced by a few folks that I've talked to, and wanted to put that out there for discussion on how you think best to move forward.
Arlene.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jessica. That was one of my questions or my comments I was going to make. I would, you know, it sounds like a significant increase, and in some respects it is, but the work is there. I mean, it needs to get done, so it's justified. But I would like to look at not a 3-year contract, but maybe a 2-year contract with that option of a third moving forward, because it's a lot more work, right? And so I think we need to see if they can handle it. They've been doing it, but I would feel more comfortable with anything less than a 3-year contract.
Yeah, and I personally want to add to that. I was one of those who had concerns about this. I feel as the number increases and to only have one respondent to the RFP is a concern to me, knowing the industry as well. I know your average day landscaper isn't familiar with the city's RFP process. So it's seeing that there's no cost savings by having a year, a 2-year, or a 3-year. So that being said, I would like to actually propose an amendment to this to read $180,000 for 1 year. I feel that way we can at least keep who we have now honest, and then next year go back out to RFP and perhaps even get that price even lower, seeing as it's escalated so much over the last few years. And I do agree it's a lot of work, but I also think we need to keep this competitive. So the motion on the floor now is for the amendment to reduce it from 3 years to 1 year. All in
Councilman
favor?
Kaides, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Jessica, how many years have we had meticulous?
We've had them for 3.5 years. And I just want to clarify that the contract's not going from 112,000 to 180,000. What's happening is it would go from 112,000 to 128,000, and the additional funding there would go to the addition of Klondike Park, the addition of the MLK corridors along MLK Drive from the clock tower down to Low. And in addition, it would include 15 extra waterings, which were not included in the original contract. So the scope of work has increased, and I believe it justifies the increase in the budget. But the 180 is slightly deceiving in the sense that it also includes the 22,000 for the spring plants and the 27,000 for the holiday decorations. So I just want to be clear and want to make sure that I clarify that on behalf of Meticulous, as they're not here to clarify that themselves.
So when you went out for the RFP, did you go out for what, a 1 year? Where'd the 3 years come from, them or us?
No, that came from us. So the standard contracts that we generally do are 3 years in addition to 2 1-year options. So it would be a total of 5 years, but the last 2 years would be an option on both of them. So that's a standard, that was standard as recommended by procurement.
And we have never had we like these guys, right?
Yes, we do. And as a matter of fact, when I first received the contract in order to manage it from redevelopment, I was surprised at the amount of money that was dedicated to the contract and felt like it was a lot. But as I've dug through and learned the importance in the cost of watering and what they're doing and how they're doing it and their responsiveness, I think they've done a really good job. And they've really picked it up with the holiday decorations and being able to do that heavy lift, coordinating with the police and being able to make sure that all of that is done. So they're in great communication with us. I probably talk to Joe maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And in addition to that, any additional cost that does come in or any additional work that's outside of the scope, we have it in agreement that they will email that request in writing to the city, and that we will then offer approval, or we will deny based on what we think of that. And so I do have to say that the prior contract, I believed, excluded some really important parts of the city that we need to prioritize, and it also excluded those additional waterings. And I think that definitely needed to be addressed. And so, you know, I feel like they've done a good job, but I also feel like we rewrote the scope to be a lot more to offer a lot more clarity on what we want, and also to be able to keep the vendor more accountable to what we're asking them to do.
It seems to me we've gone out and asked for a 3-year proposal, and now we're going to say we don't want to do it. I'm not going to support the amendment, the motion. I think we have a contractor who just done a really good job. We're happy with them. We went out and asked for a 3-year proposal, and now we're not going to do it. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, and I just add, I just, this goes beyond just having, landscaper cut my grass. I feel, knowing the industry, I could tell you landscapers aren't going looking on the city's website for landscaping contracts. I mean, it's just out of there. It's just unheard of. So I don't know. I just feel like, hey, it could be a little bit more competitive. I think people can, if you get the word out, maybe let people know about its even existence. Hey, saving $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I don't know, keep it competitive. Only having one response seems, unusual. And hey, but I guess end of the day. So that being said, any other questions?
John, I just want to speak to that too. I think, I think the lack of response and even from folks in the city that are landscapers or who can do the work might stem back from prior experiences applying for these types of grants or not, or participating with the redevelopment agency. I think there have been some hiccups in the past. And I will tell you that the experience of some folks, some minority business owners or companies has been pretty negative. And so that could be one of the reasons too, why you haven't gotten as many responses to the RFP, because a lot of people in the city feel like, and maybe it came through your department this time, or was it through redevelopment?
No, it was through the city.
Yeah,
it was through our
through the city.
department, and it was through our department. It was posted.
And so there's just been some negative experiences, I would say, between local businesses that are able to do this work and how the redevelopment agency used to handle this whole process of RFPs and employing and bringing folks on that live in the city to this process. So I question that, Tom. That's where I'm coming from as far as another 3-year contract. And I'm not saying anything negative about Meticulous. I think they've done a good job.
Yeah, I hear you. I just don't.
But if that's what we offered, can we, renege on that?
Darlene, I hear you. I just wonder, what's going to be different next time? We put out our RFP. How do we get more people? And what's to say we're going to get more people? Anyway, I know David wants to speak.
Yeah,
David?
thank you. Hey, Jess, question. When did this RFP go out?
It went out in early May.
Early May.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it was out for 3 weeks. And so it concluded, I think it was like May 21st it concluded. So it was the last week of April or first week of May that we put it out.
Well, I have a landscaper that lives in my house with me, and that's a really busy season to suddenly look at suddenly go after another contract. So that's late in the season for a contract of this size. My next question is you said that the scope increased, right? So we've got more plantings, you've got other things. We've increased the scope on this from what the contract was before. It was 112, you said, was 100,
That's correct.
112.
Yep.
So when we go up to 180, is that when you look at the 112, what was the prior contract, adjusting for inflation and everything else, is the 180 in line with what you understand to be?
So that's the part that I want to clarify, right? So in reality, it was 112,000 plus 22,000 plus 28,000. Right? So that is what is comparable to the 180. So it's gone from like 165 to 180.
And those two other numbers are the additional units that you've put on, the additional areas.
That's right.
More watering and all of that.
Right. So with the original,
line.
right. So the original contract, Meticulous never coordinated and purchased the flowers or the holiday decorations. We did all that separately through the redevelopment agency did that separately. And when we took on the contract, we followed their business model to be able to do that. But in fairness, it ends up with the staff members coordinating to get flowers planted in the pots and get them delivered to Norwalk, and then coordinating with Meticulous to pick them up. And that, so it's a lot of coordination that I don't think is necessary.
So the RFP shows an increase in the scope, therefore you've got a proposal that shows an increase in that scope.
That's right.
Thanks.
So the way that the
clears that up.
RFP, the way the RFP got released is the scope that for landscaping was the MLK medians, Klondike Park, and the 15 extra waterings. That's what justifies the 112,000 to 128,000 jump. The cost of the flowers and the cost of the holiday decorations are exactly what we had paid in previous years.
Okay. And that gets us to 180,000 on the
That's
contract.
right. And then I packaged it together so that the vendor would, and actually, as a matter of fact, the way in which we release the RFP is we ask for responses on the scope of work. And then we asked for an alternate bid on the flowers and an alternate bid on the holiday decorations. And so everyone was asked to be able to bid out the flowers and bid out the holiday decorations. And we gave them the specs on what we wanted them to bid out on. And so if you were to look at the original contract, it's only the scope of work. If you were to look at the new contract that is on the table tonight for discussion, it's the original scope of work plus those 3 items that I mentioned to you, in addition to alternate bid 1 and alternate bid 2.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, seeing none, there's a motion on the floor for the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Fails. Okay. Okay. Now motion on the item. I mean, who moved this? Did we have someone move this? Now I'm confused. Ms. Shanahan. Okay. Now all in favor of the item, please raise your hand. Okay, in favor, and I'm actually going to be a no. So I'll let the record show all in favor besides myself. Okay, moving on. Redevelopment Agency advanced submitted application to the Common Council for the approval at the June 15, 22 Common Council meeting for the inclusion of 22 Connecticut Neighborhood Assistance Act program. Would someone like to move that item? Thank you, Mr. Hubelman. I believe we have Stephen. Are you here to speak to this item?
Actually, I'm going to speak, Katie O'Leary.
Oh, great. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Welcome, everybody, or good evening, everybody. The Connecticut Neighborhood Assistance Act 2022 here in Norwalk, the application process or the application submission process opened up at the end of May. We opened it up at the end of May. Applications were due to me on May 6th. Let me back up. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the Connecticut Neighborhood Assistance Act. Generally speaking, it's a tax credit program through the Department of Revenue Services, which is designed to provide funding for municipal and tax exempt organizations by providing a corporation business tax credit for businesses who make cash contributions to these entities. Here in Norwalk this year, we received 20 applications from 19 different organizations. 10 of those organizations applied last year as well. 9 were new. A list of the organizations was included with the agenda, and all of the applications are posted on the city's site. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay. Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous, great. All right, item 2,
Thank you.
advanced CDBG, thank you. PY 48 annual action plan to the Common Council for its approval and to authorize the mayor to execute any and all documents associated with the submission of the PY 48 AAP to HUD and all documents consistent with the approved PY 48 AAP. Someone like to move this item? Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Before I get to, before we speak to it, you've all should have received a DocuSign for your to declare if you're in conflict or not. We thought we'd make it easier versus scanning and sending it back and forth and going through that. So I want to thank you also, everyone in redevelopment, for making that happen. So if you haven't done it and sent it back, it should be in your inbox, and sooner you get that done, sooner it's out of the way.
That was super easy to do.
Yeah,
So,
it was.
yeah,
it was
thanks for
great.
working that out. Really easy.
Yeah, it was. I thought it'd be much easier because I always, with the scanning and the signing, I found it quite difficult. So, Mr. Livingston, move the item. So, who will we speak? Stephen, will you be speaking to this?
I will. Yeah, let me get the right thing on the screen. So as Brian had discussed earlier, we are a little bit delayed from what we would typically see due to HUD not releasing our funding allocation at their usual date. Because of this, the public comment period is overlapping with what would normally have had been finished already. So any public comments received, there were obviously none received at the hearing, but any submitted in writing will be presented at the upcoming council meeting on June 28th. We have a little bit over $1 million of funding for the PY 48 year. This is FY 2022. It's the third year of our 5-year consolidated plan. We have a list of the selected or the proposed subrecipients that will be finalized with the Common Council's approval at the next meeting. And if anybody has any questions about anything, I'm here to answer them. The actual annual action plan document is obviously much longer than the summary that is here. So I'll leave this up on the screen, and if there's any questions about specific pages, please let me know.
Any questions? I want to thank you all for giving me the choices, and thank redevelopment for, going through those and making sure everyone's requests were met, and it's just made the process so much easier and democratic. So thank you all for that. If there are no questions, all in favor, please raise your hand and signify yes. Looks to be unanimous. Great. Stephen, thank you for all your time. I know a lot goes into this. I know it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of your time. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. And we'll continue to do the DocuSign in the future for anything that we need.
That's great. Thank you. One more item. It's not on the agenda, but I've been asked to add it to the agenda, and it's pretty self-explanatory. Jess, do you mind going into it a little bit before I propose suspending the rules to add it?
Yeah, no, not at all. So as part of the MLK Corridor Initiative, we talked about installing cameras to be able to monitor areas of high dumping, where there's high habitual dumping happening. And these are cases where we're seeing mattresses, appliances, air conditioners, paint, highly toxic materials that are being sort of collected in different areas. We have been doing multiple cleanups throughout the city for a number of years, and we've been collecting literally thousands of pounds of garbage when we go out and do these cleanups. And so one of the things we talked about through MLK Corridor was to be able to install the cameras on different poles to be able to allow the public to see that we're monitoring these areas. In most cases, we've been working with SNU, and they've been absolutely fantastic as partners to be able to allow us to install the cameras on their poles. But in some cases, the poles are actually owned by Eversource. So the item the item for discussion tonight is to be able to have the city enter an agreement with Eversource to be able to have cameras that are owned by the city of Norwalk installed on the Eversource poles in order to be able to monitor those particular areas throughout South Norwalk.
Like I said, pretty self-explanatory. If there are no questions, I will now call for a vote to suspend the rules to add the following items to the agenda, that being authorize Harry W. Rilling to execute a poll attachment agreement and other documents incidental thereto with Eversource Energy. All in favor of suspending the rules to add the item? Okay. And now, would someone like to move that item? Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. All in favor of the item? Unanimous, great. Okay, all right, thank you all. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Sabrina.
Can I ask a question? Thank you, Jessica, for that. When do you think the installation will happen in those areas?
David Shockley and the neighborhood improvement team have been working with Eversource and SNU to be able to install those cameras. A number of the cameras have already been installed on the SNU poles. And so I think as soon as we get the agreement in place, we'll be in a really good place to install them. So if it was up to us, as soon as the agreement was signed, we would be installing them the next day. And so we'll work with the Eversource team to figure out what that looks like. But I can give you an update when I talk to David. Great. And he talks to the Eversource folks, but ASAP.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Ms. Young. All in favor? All right, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Good night. Thank you. Oh, wait a minute. Where are we going? Is this Tom's last meeting?
It is.
It is. Tom, so I count it a pleasure and a privilege and an honor to have served with you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna miss you.
We're all gonna miss you, Tom.
I'm glad you stayed on. Aren't we gonna miss him? I'm not one for the Republican and Democrat tag. I just think you are a wonderful human being.
Well, thank
And they're gonna have a hard time finding a replacement. So don't forget about us here.
I will never do that. You know that.
Truly
I will
mean
never
that.
do that. And I'll see you at our next meeting.
I'll see you at the next one.
Mhm.
All right. Bye.
Good
Bye,
night.
Sabrina.
Bye.
Thank you, Sabrina. Bye-bye.
No problem. Bye.